So there are certain moments in astrology that feel less like events in the sky and more like quiet conversations with the soul. The Cancer new moon is one of those moments. Unlike many astrological transits that inspire movement, ambition, or outward change, this lunation invites us inward. It asks us to step away from the noise of everyday life and spend a moment listening to something we often overlook: our emotional landscape. Every new moon represents a beginning, and it marks the start of a fresh lunar cycle, a time when the moon disappears into darkness before gradually returning to the sky. Symbolically, this darkness is not an ending. It is a place of potential, a place where new intentions are formed long before they become visible. But not every beginning arrives through action, as some beginnings arrive through awareness, and some begin when we finally recognize a pattern we've been repeating for years. So when we understand that the greatest obstacle standing in our way isn't the world around us, but an emotional story we've continued to carry within ourselves, this Cancer new moon belongs to that kind of beginning. Cancer is the sign ruled by the moon itself. In traditional astrology, no other sign shares such an intimate relationship with our emotional lives. The moon governs memory, instinct, nurture, belonging, and the invisible rhythms that shape our inner world. While the sun speaks to who we strive to become, the moon reflects who we already are beneath the surface. It remembers experiences we have forgotten, the moments that shaped us long before we understood their significance, made us feel safe. And it remembers the people who made us feel loved, and the moments that taught us to protect our hearts. Whether we realize it or not, these emotional memories quietly influence our decisions every day. And that is why Cancer is often misunderstood. People sometimes describe Cancer simply as emotional or sensitive, but its symbolism reaches much deeper than that. Cancer is the guardian of emotional memory. It teaches that every feeling leaves an imprint. Every experience becomes part of the inner foundation upon which we build our lives. And sometimes that foundation supports us, and sometimes it quietly limits us. This new moon asks us to examine that foundation with honesty, not to criticize ourselves or dwell endlessly on the past, but to understand how yesterday continues to shape today. Because before we can create a new future, we must first recognize the emotional patterns that still hold authority over our present. That is the deeper purpose of this lunation, and it is not asking us to erase our feelings, it is asking us to become conscious of them. And there is an important difference. When emotions remain unconscious, they quietly make decisions on our behalf. And when emotions become conscious, they transform into wisdom. That transformation is where healing begins. Throughout this exploration, we're going to look beyond the surface meaning of this Cancer new moon. We'll explore its traditional astrological symbolism, examine the ancient wisdom connected to this lunar cycle, and then we'll discuss the psychological and spiritual lessons hidden beneath its symbolism. And we'll ask ourselves a question that may become the central theme of this entire lunation. What emotional truth has been quietly waiting for you to acknowledge? Because sometimes life doesn't ask us to become someone new. Sometimes it simply asks us to return to the most authentic version of ourselves, the one that has been patiently waiting beneath layers of fear, memory, expectation, and emotional habit. And that is where this new moon begins, not in the sky, but within us. If we are going to understand the true meaning of this Cancer new moon, we first have to understand something important about astrology itself. Every new moon, every full moon, every planetary movement becomes part of a much larger conversation unfolding across the sky. Like chapters in a book, each event builds upon the one that came before it. The heavens rarely begin telling a completely new story overnight. More often, they continue a narrative that has already been developing for months or even years. This Cancer new moon is no exception. Although it marks the beginning of a new lunar cycle, it also represents the culmination of a much deeper emotional journey. Think about your own life for a moment. Over the past year, perhaps even longer, there have likely been moments when old emotions resurfaced unexpectedly. Conversations from the past found their way back into your present. Relationships changed. Priorities shifted. Situations that once seemed stable suddenly demanded your attention. Perhaps you found yourself questioning decisions that once felt certain, or you discovered that what used to make you feel secure no longer brings the same sense of peace. And maybe you've simply felt as though life has been quietly asking you to grow emotionally, even if you couldn't quite explain why. This is often how Cancer operates. Its lessons are rarely loud. They unfold gradually. Like the changing tides guided by the moon, emotional transformation happens slowly, often beneath the surface, until one day we realize we are no longer the person we once were. That is why new moons in Cancer carry a unique kind of power. Unlike fire signs, which inspire bold action, or air signs, which encourage new ideas, Cancer begins with the heart. Before asking us what we want to achieve, it asks something far more fundamental. What do you need in order to truly feel safe? Now, this question may sound simple, but very few of us answer it honestly. Because safety is not only about where we live or who surrounds us, it is also about our emotional world. What beliefs do we continue to carry because they once protected us? What habits have become so familiar that we mistake them for necessities? Which emotional responses are genuine reflections of who we are today, and which are echoes of experiences we have already outgrown? Cancer gently brings these questions into our awareness, and it helps us recognize that emotional security built upon yesterday's fears cannot fully support tomorrow's growth. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of Cancer. It teaches us to honor the past without becoming imprisoned by it. Memory is sacred. Experience is valuable. Our history deserves respect. But wisdom is not found by living endlessly in what has already happened. Wisdom emerges when we allow the lessons of the past to become the foundation for a healthier future. That is the invitation of this new moon, to reflect without becoming trapped in reflection. In many ways, this lunation asks us to become observers of our own emotional lives. Rather than immediately reacting to every feeling, it encourages us to pause and ask where that feeling comes from. Is this fear responding to the present moment, or is it responding to something that happened years ago? Is this hesitation rooted in wisdom, or is it simply an old emotional habit repeating itself? Questions like these are not always comfortable, but they are often transformative because emotional awareness creates choice, and choice creates freedom. One of the most remarkable qualities of Cancer is its extraordinary capacity for emotional intelligence. Yet emotional intelligence is not merely about feeling deeply. It is about understanding why we feel what we feel. Without that understanding, emotions can quietly shape our decisions without our knowledge. With that understanding, those same emotions become guides rather than obstacles. This is why the Cancer new moon is not simply about beginning something new. It is about beginning from a new level of awareness. The external changes we hope to create in our lives rarely last unless something shifts internally first. That inner shift is what this lunation encourages. It reminds us that genuine transformation does not begin with changing our circumstances. It begins with changing our relationship to ourselves. As this new moon unfolds, the greatest opportunities may not appear through dramatic events or obvious signs. Instead, they may arrive as quiet realizations. A conversation that suddenly makes sense from a different perspective. An emotion that no longer carries the same weight it once did. These moments often seem small, yet they have the power to change the direction of our lives. Because sometimes the most important breakthrough isn't discovering something new, and sometimes it's finally seeing something that has been present all along. And that realization prepares us for the next layer of this journey. Because before we explore the deeper symbolism surrounding this Cancer new moon, we first need to understand the ancient language through which astrology has interpreted these moments for centuries. That is exactly where we'll go next. Every new moon marks the beginning of a new cycle, but not every beginning requires us to gain something new. Sometimes, the greatest transformation begins with release, not by forgetting the past, but by understanding it. There is a profound difference between carrying wisdom forward and continuing to carry emotional weight that has already served its purpose. When people hear the word karma, they often think of fate or punishment. Yet, in many spiritual traditions, karma is simply the continuation of old patterns until they are fully understood. Every unresolved fear, every belief formed during a painful moment, and every emotional habit developed for survival quietly influences the choices we make today. This is one of Cancer's deepest teachings. Ruled by the moon, Cancer preserves emotional memory unlike any other sign of the zodiac. It remembers not only what happened, but how those experiences felt. Over time, those memories become the lens through which we view the present, often without realizing it. That is why this lunation asks us to pause and look inward. Not every emotional reaction belongs to the present moment. Sometimes we hesitate because of old disappointments. Sometimes we struggle to trust because of wounds that have already passed. Familiarity may feel safe, but it is not always where growth is found. One of the quiet truths of spiritual growth is that protection and limitation often look the same. The walls we build after painful experiences may protect us for a season, but if we never lower them, they eventually prevent us from receiving the very things we have been searching for. Nature reminds us that nothing is meant to remain unchanged. The moon moves through its phases, rivers continue to flow, and every season eventually gives way to another. Yet we often cling to old identities simply because they are familiar, even when they no longer reflect who we are becoming. Perhaps the greatest lesson of this Cancer new moon is learning the difference between memory and identity. Our experiences have shaped us, but they were never meant to define us forever. Every difficult season leaves behind two gifts, a memory and a lesson. The memory belongs to the past, but the lesson belongs to the future. If old emotions begin to surface during this lunar cycle, don't see them as signs that you're moving backward. Instead, ask yourself what they are trying to teach before they finally leave. Sometimes life brings familiar feelings back one last time so we can respond with greater wisdom than before. Real transformation rarely arrives through dramatic moments. More often, it appears quietly. We notice that old fears no longer control us. We make decisions with greater clarity. We begin choosing peace over habit and growth over familiarity. As this new moon unfolds, ask yourself one simple question. What part of my life am I holding on to simply because it feels familiar? Whatever comes to mind, meet it with compassion rather than judgment. The purpose of this lunation is not to erase your past, but to help you carry it more lightly. Perhaps that is the greatest gift of this Cancer new moon. Now, every transit offers insight, but insight alone is never enough. It is what we choose to do with that awareness that determines whether a cycle becomes another passing moment or a genuine turning point. The wisdom of this Cancer new moon is surprisingly simple. It asks us to become more conscious of our emotional lives, not to suppress our feelings, nor to become consumed by them, but to understand them. Every emotion carries a message, yet not every emotion should be allowed to make our decisions. As this lunar cycle unfolds, pay attention to the moments that stir something within you, a conversation, a memory, or an unexpected feeling may reveal more than it first appears. Instead of reacting immediately, allow yourself a moment of reflection. Ask whether your response belongs to the present or whether it has been shaped by something much older. Often, that single pause is enough to transform the way we move forward. This is also a powerful time to strengthen the areas of life that truly make you feel secure. Cancer reminds us that real security is not found in controlling every outcome, but in creating a stable inner foundation. That may mean spending more time with the people who genuinely support you, reconnecting with your home, establishing healthier routines, or simply making space for rest in a world that constantly demands your attention. If this new moon inspires you to begin something, let it be something sustainable rather than dramatic. Small, consistent changes often create deeper transformation than sudden bursts of motivation. A daily journal, a few minutes of quiet reflection, or an honest conversation you've been avoiding may become the first step toward lasting emotional growth. Above all, remain open to what life is trying to place before you. Sometimes the opportunities we pray for arrive in forms we don't immediately recognize. They may appear as a new perspective, an unexpected conversation, or even the courage to let go of something that no longer belongs in our lives. What first feels like an ending may quietly become the beginning you have been waiting for. As this lunar cycle continues, remember that growth is rarely loud. More often, it unfolds through small decisions made with greater awareness than before. Each time you choose understanding over reaction, trust over fear, or acceptance over resistance, you align yourself more closely with the wisdom this Cancer new moon offers. Perhaps that is the greatest invitation of all. Not to change your entire life overnight, but to take one meaningful step toward becoming emotionally freer than you were yesterday. Because every lasting transformation begins the same way, with a single choice, made consciously and repeated with intention. As the moon slowly grows brighter in the nights ahead, may it remind you that your own growth follows the same rhythm. It doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds gradually, one quiet moment, one honest realization, and one courageous step at a time. And that is more than enough. Every new moon is an invitation to participate consciously in a new beginning. While astrology can reveal the themes surrounding a particular lunar cycle, it is our choices that determine how those energies unfold in our lives. Because Cancer is ruled by the moon, this is an ideal time to reconnect with yourself in simple, meaningful ways. You don't need elaborate rituals or complicated spiritual practices. Sometimes the most powerful form of healing begins with a few quiet moments of honesty. Spend some time reflecting on what has been occupying your heart. Ask yourself what emotional burden you are ready to release and what kind of inner life you hope to build moving forward. Writing your thoughts in a journal, sitting in silence, or simply taking a walk near water can become surprisingly powerful acts of reflection during this lunar cycle. Cancer also reminds us that healing often begins at home. Consider creating a space that brings you peace, reconnecting with loved ones, or expressing gratitude for the people who make you feel safe and supported. Small acts of care, whether directed toward yourself or others, carry far greater significance under this new moon than dramatic gestures. Above all, set your intentions with clarity rather than urgency. There is no need to force change overnight. Like the moon itself, personal growth unfolds gradually. Trust that each small step taken with awareness will eventually lead to lasting transformation. As this new lunar cycle begins, allow yourself to move forward with an open heart. Perhaps the greatest ritual of all is simply choosing to become more aware of your own emotional world. Because when we understand ourselves more deeply, we naturally begin making choices that are wiser, healthier, and more aligned with the person we are becoming. Before the first sliver of light appears in the sky, There is a moment when the moon seems to disappear completely. Yet we know it hasn't vanished. It is simply preparing for another cycle. Perhaps our own lives unfold in much the same way. There are seasons when clarity feels distant, when progress seems invisible, and when we begin to wonder whether anything is changing at all. Yet beneath the surface, something is always taking shape. Growth rarely announces itself with certainty. More often, it begins quietly, long before we recognize its presence.